Let's talk about the effect of cross-chart conjunctions in compatibility astrology. Now, to explain that concept for a second, conjunction means when two planets come together, so when they're on the same degree or close to the same degree. Cross-chart means when this happens between two charts. So the research that I'm going to present here is based on analysis of a 31 couple sample. Now, these 31 couples are a very high quality sample in that the data is very well known. So they've all submitted their data for this research and they've all answered certain questions for me. So I can rate each couple on how good or bad the relationship is and how long it or short it was. This table is only analyzing the charts that are identified as belonging to good relationships. And in those good relationships, there was an ascendant to ascendant conjunction in one case. There was an ascendant to sun conjunction in one case. Ascendant to moon in one case, and so forth. Right? So that's what these numbers mean. Where it is blank, there were 0 cases. So for example, there were 0 cases of Mars-Sun conjunctions in good relationships. Now, here's the same analysis, but done for the couples that are identified as having had bad relationships. Bad relationships is not very much of a value judgment. Bad relationships means these people had a terrible time, were miserable, they were physically violent to each other, emotionally abusive, etc. It's not like, oh, I think this was a little bit bad. So for example, here you see there was a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in 3 of these cases. Another thing that you can do with this data is you can look down at the bottom. Here at the bottom we have tallies of how many times a planet has been the focal point of a conjunction. The moon was involved in 12 conjunctions in good relationships, whereas Rahu and Ketu were only in 7, Mars only in 5. But on this other side, with the bad relationships, we still had the moon being involved in a lot, 13. But Mercury was more the star here. Mercury was involved in a lot of conjunctions in bad relationships. This may be a clue. You can start to say perhaps communication is really the issue, or perhaps friendliness or friendship or equality is really the issue that's at the heart of most of the bad relationships these days, since Mercury seems to be coming out as being a focal point. Now, this brings up a point. The moon thing, for example, brings up a point. Well, the moon was involved in 12 conjunctions in good relationships and 13 in bad relationships. So what is it? Is a moon conjunction more indicative that the relationship will be good or bad? Here, this table shows you the number of times that this conjunction occurred in a good relationship minus the number of times that it happened in a bad relationship. So there you can see things like moon to the ascendant. This seems to be more exclusively good, Mercury to moon. And then here on this chart we have the same purification of the data for only bad relationships. With only bad relationships, a lot of the Mercury things persisted. There's Mercury to Sun, Mercury to Mars, Mercury to Jupiter remained at 2. So in the tallies it looks like, okay, Mercury really is involved in a lot of bad relationships, Mercury conjunctions. Okay, now let's look at the same data for the long-term relationships, the relationships that lasted a long time, regardless of whether they were good or bad, and the relationships that lasted for a short time, regardless of whether they were good or bad. So here's a table of long-term relationships, unpurified. You can see there was a lot of moon-Jupiter conjunctions. And the moon is really the key focal point. It's got 16 total. And here is a table for the conjunctions that were active in short-term relationships. There's a lot less conjunctions, isn't there? And you see that number on the bottom of the chart, 55. There was 55 total conjunctions amongst the short-term relationships. Over here with the long-term relationships, there's 105. Now that's very interesting. The long-term relationships had more conjunctions, a lot more conjunctions, twice as many conjunctions than the short-term relationships. Regardless of whether you want to interpret these as being difficult conjunctions, easy conjunctions, whatever, having conjunctions between the two charts showed people sticking together longer. So here's only long-term relationships. Still, you see Jupiter-Moon conjunction still has 3. That means the Jupiter-Moon conjunction didn't come up once in my sample in short-term relationships, but it came up 3 times in long-term relationships. So that's pretty compelling. So this is one of the actually very exciting things about the research so far. It very conclusively shows that the number of conjunctions present between 2 people is very, very, very indicative of their how much they stick together, how much they stay together. Here we got 70-something conjunctions for people that have long-term relationships and 20 conjunctions for people that have short-term relationships. That's more than 3 times as much. There's more than 3 times more conjunctions in the charts of long-term couples than in short-term couples. So I'll be doing that in the near future, really exploring how to quantify this and turn this into a formula that works on a per couple basis to analyze how many conjunctions you have in this chart, how strong are these conjunctions, and based on that, we can say how likely it is that this relationship will last for how long. When you look at the numbers on the good and bad side, good is exactly equal to bad. So really, we have no way of telling whether the relationship is good or bad by the number of conjunctions. Whereas with the long and short, it's very obvious. There's 72 conjunctions for long-term relationships and 22 for short-term. So this is the second hypothesis that has been my working hypothesis since 2010, is that joining of charts together to do synastry doesn't show you how good or bad the relationship will be. And most people have a misconception that it will show you how good the relationship is. It doesn't. It shows you how much the couple sticks together. Whether they're sticking together in hell or whether they're sticking together in heaven isn't revealed by the way their charts go together. Hopefully, it's revealed by their individual charts or other things. But it's not revealed especially it's not revealed by the conjunctions in the chart. Now, I will make other analyses of this data, for example, to separate benefic conjunctions from malefic conjunctions, or same conjunctions, like conjunctions between malefics versus conjunctions between opposite types, like a benefic to a malefic. But I've already done that. So I'll show you this screen. Here, this screen is actually showing conjunctions and aspects at the same time. When trying to assess the goodness or badness of a relationship, the accuracy was much less always than in trying to determine the longevity of it. Like the way I have it set up here in this readout with the variables that I have set and the planets that I'm using and the techniques that I'm using, etc. I got 74% accuracy for predicting the longevity of the relationship, which is pretty good. 74% accuracy by math alone. No intuition, nothing. But only 51% for predicting the goodness. 51% is not really acceptable. And no matter how I adjusted the variables on the right, which planets I choose to include, or whether or not I did dynamic weighting or not, or whatever, the goodness accuracy would always be so much less than the longevity accuracy. Even if the longevity accuracy was down to 50%, then the goodness accuracy would be down to 25%. So this clearly supports my long-term theory that compatibility astrology, which is synastric, using 2 charts together, does not show the goodness or badness of a relationship. It only shows the stickiness of it. Now, I also said that there was a third conclusion that we could draw pretty strongly from this research. Looking at long-term, for example, you can see that this Jupiter-Moon conjunction seems like a real key. All right? It really happens a lot in long-term relationships and didn't happen at all in short-term relationships. And what you can also see is if you look down at the tallies, it was consistent that the moon was the focal point and Jupiter were the focal point for conjunctions in long-term relationships. So that's something that can help us direct our future work in compatibility astrology, that probably conjunctions involving the moon and Jupiter are really good for making the relationship last a long time. Now, if you look at the conjunctions for good and bad relationships, although I think that these are not as reliable, but you do find that the bad relationships did have a spike when it came to Ketu influencing Mercury, and there was a definite spike with conjunctions to Mercury being problematic in bad relationships. So these are two mini conclusions that we can draw, that good relationships tend to have conjunctions to Moon and Jupiter, bad relationships Ketu Mercury. Okay, so that's my report on how the research is going regarding the effect of cross chart conjunctions in compatibility astrology. What I'll be doing next is analyzing cross-chart aspects in compatibility astrology, and I hope to make a video on that for you in the next week or less. So if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, subscribe to it now, and don't miss any of this stuff. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. Give me a like to make me feel good, and I will see you soon. Thanks so much.